Hello, my name is John Didi, professor of political science at the community colleges of Baltimore County. You are watching today's Maryland State Politics Substack podcast. My guest today is a candidate for the House of Delegates from the 40th District, Anderson Jean. Welcome aboard.
Well, thank you, John. I'm honored to be on the show today, and I look forward to a healthy discussion on how we can make Baltimore City the greatest city to live, not only in Maryland, but throughout the United States and around the world.
My first question is, why are you running?
Well, John, I'm running because similar to like our campaign slogan, I believe in a new way forward for Baltimore City. As someone who's been in academia for the last 10 years, I want to see Baltimore City provide our students a first-class education. That's one. Two, I want to make affordability a topic that not just a topic in our city and our state, but how do we come up with solutions to make sure that everyday Americans in the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland are able to afford transportation, that we bring down utility cost of utilities, and that we also make sure that we bring down the cost of groceries and that families can live and they're not working to live, and they get to spend time with their families. That's two. Number three, we want to focus on our older population. Talking to seniors around the city of Baltimore, they're not getting the best housing. They're not getting the best care. I spoke to one senior where she told me that she was left at a bus stop after she was picked up from her service, and it was late into the night. That's unacceptable. And then finally, how do we incentivize small business to come into the district so families can make an honest living? And so our campaign is, once again, a new way forward, inspiring hope and solving basic solutions that, everyday Americans living in the greatest country on earth should have access to.
My first question is, you talked about the slogan of a new way forward. What is the new way forward to dealing with the housing problem in Baltimore City?
Well, the new way forward is simple. We're making sure that we're bringing down the cost of living in Baltimore City. When it comes in terms of housing, we have a lot of vacant properties in Baltimore City. So the question is, how do we make those places habitable? How do we make sure that owners are not just buying property and they're just sitting on it and they're not building on it? I remember a couple of years ago, during the debate between President Obama and Mitt Romney, where the Obama administration, they were pulling leases from folks who were getting permits on land, but they weren't using the land, so they were pulling it back. And so I think the question is, if someone's going to purchase property in Baltimore City, they have to use it, whether they're going to revitalize it for business or revitalize it for so folks can move into it. And so we want to make sure that we set a timetable so that when you do purchase property, you're going to use it, and so then it can become habitable, and then folks can afford to move in. That's one. Two, we want to make sure that we're helping struggling families afford these homes. Whether it's educating them on how to work the bank system so they could get a mortgage or go through the process of applying to rent property. And so we want to provide basic necessities, and so people can live in Baltimore City and make it a great city once more.
Dovetailing into this a little bit, I don't know if you're familiar with the current foreclosure crisis involving a lot of companies that bought a lot of property in Baltimore City. And basically, the concern right now is they're holding a lot of property and they paid a lot of money for it.
Yep.
Housing market has changed. How do you deal with stuff like that with speculators? I mean, I like to watch the show Flip and Flop like a lot of other people, but there's a lot of speculators out there who they may not do the A1 quality type of work, but also they're speculating, and it's having a major impact on the real estate market.
Well, the thing is, it goes back to what I said earlier. When I think we need to form agreements with these speculators. If you purchase the property or you're leasing the property, we have to set a timetable on when they have to start building, or else we're going to buy those back. Because walking down the street in an American city to see a homeless population, that's unacceptable in an American city. And so if you're going to buy the property, or if you're going to lease it, there has to be a timetable set by the city and the state that states that, hey, look, if you're going to buy this land, if you're going to lease this land, you have a certain amount of time to start using it, whether you're revitalizing it for business once more, or you're going to revitalize it to make it affordable so families can move into it. If not, then we're going to have to buy that back because it doesn't make sense once more in an American city to see veterans, to see folks who are barely making ends meet are going homeless. Mind you, we have lots of vacant housing and vacant property that folks have purchased or they're leasing, but they're not using. So I think that is that is the main way we can do that. And I point back to the argument that was made years ago at the debate when people were buying federal land, but they were not using it and they were just sitting on it. And the federal government was taking back those leases and said, hey, look, either you use it or you lose it.
One of the big issues that's going to come up this year in the House of Delegates and in the state Senate in the Maryland General Assembly is the issue of redistricting. If you were currently a member of the House of Delegates, would you support the efforts of basically mid-cycle redistricting? Would you oppose it? How do you feel about the whole situation?
Well, the thing is, when it comes to redistricting, I think that it's become a controversial issue. And so my thing is that I think we've reached a point in American history where, people are everything is done for political gain. And so if I were a member of the House of Delegates, it's a conversation I would have with the caucus, also with leadership to see that how does that benefit the citizens of our state, and the citizens of Baltimore City. And if it does, then, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
My next question deals with an issue that's going to come up a lot this year, and it's the budget. We have a structural deficit. What programs would you support maybe cutting and trimming a little bit? What would you believe should be increased a little bit? How do you look at the budget situation? What would be your thoughts as far as how the state should deal with it?
I think we need to be fiscal responsible as a state, and I think we can be fiscally responsible. And so, my I do want to continue investing in education, and we do spend more per pupil in the city of Baltimore. But the question is, how do we properly uh, how do we make sure that the funds are being properly allocated? Where's the money going? And so making cuts to education, I think that's not the way to do it. I think we should reallocate the funds to make sure they're reaching the classrooms and we're not top heavy in terms of salaries. That's one. Two, I would sit down and do a thorough review of the budget and see and make sure that our priorities are aligned prior to making cuts. I think sometimes it's easy to say, "Hey, let's cut, let's cut, let's cut." We have to make sure what our priorities are as a state and as a city and see what programs work. The ones that work, we continue to invest or we reallocate the funds. And the ones that don't, we may have to downsize. And so these are tough decisions that are not going to be made overnight. But I am for fiscal responsibility, but we have to make sure that we are doing it in line with our values, making sure that we're not going to hurt working families, we're not going to hurt children, and we're going to put a budget that's going to one deal with the deficit, but at the same time make sure that it's helping the state of Maryland move forward.
One of the big concerns people have related to the budget is the blueprint.
Yep.
If you got the chance to sit down with the governor and say, here's my thoughts on the blueprint, what would you say?
If I had a chance to sit down with Governor Moore, I would say I think the blueprint, the intentions, they mean well. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're not just spending just to spend, but we are allocating the funds where the needs are. For example, as someone who taught in Baltimore City for 1 year, I taught at Green Street Academy. I saw a dilapidated building. I saw outdated textbooks. I saw students not always meeting standards. And so we need to make sure that our funding is aligned with our priorities, what our needs are. I think sometimes folks are quick to say, let's throw more money at a problem. But throwing more money on it doesn't necessarily solve it. And so I think the blueprint, I'm in support of it, but I want to make sure that the funding is going towards our students first and foremost. And then we can deal with other areas. But too so often people say, let's throw money at an issue. And then money goes towards salaries, it goes towards programs that don't necessarily benefit the children. And so I think that I would sit down with the governor once and we would discuss, okay, what's going to best help the teachers, what's going to best help the students, what's going to best provide wraparound services, whether it's before and after school care, And then once we've solved that issue, and then we could begin to look at what do salaries look like? What does, if we have this program, is it a necessity? And then we go from there.
Next question centers on an issue that is going to get a lot of attention next year, the issue of energy. There is a lot of controversy related to it. People don't like their BG&E bills skyrocketing so much, but we're basically purchasing so much energy from the state of Pennsylvania. And we need to really keep some of these power plants open that are a little obsolete. At the same time, we need to think about nuclear. What are your thoughts as far as what Maryland needs to do to kind of right size itself related to energy policy?
Well, it's simple. I think in Maryland, we ought to be energy independent. The question is, we need to make sure that once more, we are setting our state up for the future. And the question is, do we have the capacity to build power plants that can energize the state of Maryland? And if we don't, how do we locate those lands? And two, how do we create, where do we find the experts and how do we create opportunities? Because we do have several universities in this area, and we do have engineers, and we do have folks who are in those programs. How do we incentivize them to stay here? So as we create those opportunities and invest in them, how do we incentivize them to stay here to go for to apply for those jobs? And so I think it's going to, once more, it's what our priorities are and how do we make a concerted effort to invest to becoming energy independent, so we're not relying heavily on the state of Pennsylvania.
One of the big problems related to green energy is this. Great ideas, solar power, electric cars, but people don't realize they use a lot of, for electricity, you need coal. And it is a power source you really need to deal with as far as that issue, as far as having more electrical facilities. What are your thoughts as far as balancing the push for green energy, which sounds always like a good idea, against the aspects of the cost of doing green energy?
Well, I have a balanced approach. I think we could walk and chew them at the same time. So once more, it's okay. What works best for the state of Maryland? If it means we take a balanced approach for the state, then we go with that approach. If it means we invest more in coal and less in green energy, then that's the approach we should take. But I think we should look at what our financial priorities are. And is there money there for it? And if there is, I think we should create a commission on both ends to decide what's going to work best for the state and how to move the state forward. Now, I do know with green energy, it does. There's arguments to be made for it, and there's arguments to be made for the coal folks in the coal business. But I think we need to take a balanced approach when it comes to what works best for the state of Maryland versus what works for a few.
Next question I'll ask relates to something a lot of people have talked about in the city of Baltimore, and it's a major problem: juvenile crime, juvenile justice.
Mm-hmm.
As a legislator, what type of policies would you like to see in place to deal with the problem of juvenile crime? Do you feel that the programs the mayor has done have been effective? Do you think the programs Ivan Bates have done have been effective? Where do you come down as far as dealing with juvenile justice issues?
Well, it's a it's not a one-step solution when it comes to dealing with juvenile issues in the city of Baltimore. I think Mayor Brandon Scott has done a phenomenal job, especially when he extended hours for the rec centers during the summer. You saw a crime rate come down. So I think we have to look at what's going on in the home. That's where we need to start. What the home life is like, and we need to create services and programs that's going to help support these kids. I think it's easy to say, let's just throw these kids in, let's just lock them up, let's just let's punish them. But after they serve their time, are there programs in place to support them? Because if there isn't, the rate of recidivism is going to continue to increase. And so the question is, we need to make sure that we have a multi-layer approach where, yes, we're holding them accountable, but at the same time, are we providing the services, the mentorship, the apprenticeships for them to keep them off the streets and to keep the crime rate down? I also believe that providing wraparound services, whether it's after school and before and after school care, where there are tutors in the building, and also making sure that there are systems in place for these kids to go so they can advocate for themselves. But I think that you saw once more what the mayor had done this past summer when he extended the hours at the rec center. You saw crime go down because the kids had something to do. They had a place where they could go and release that energy versus engaging in criminal behavior. So I think the question is we need to analyze what works for each child because one size does not fit all. But we also, while maintaining um, accountability, but also at the same time providing them room for growth and development. Because I don't believe locking up a bunch of kids is going to solve the problem.
Last question I want to ask is something you talked about early on in our conversation. It's a word that Democrats have been talking a lot about, and it's a word that is driving President Trump insane. Affordability.
Yeah.
It is a major problem. A lot of people have for every person that's doing well, another person could be doing a hell of a lot better. On the issue of affordability, when you think of affordability in general, what is your definition goals related to affordability as far as for helping people?
Well, talking to constituents, talking to my future constituents, what they've told me is it's simple. The cost of transportation, the cost of groceries, the cost of doing business. I've spoken to several business owners and they want to bring small business to the city, but they have to go through a process. They have to go to the red tape. So the question is, how do we streamline that so they can bring in businesses? Um, People talking about the cost of utility. So the question is, what plans are we going to put forward as a state to address those issues? Because when I'm talking to people, it's like, hey, look, we want to vote for you, but if we cannot afford to feed our kids, then we're not going to the polls. And so the question is, once more, what our priorities are. How do we align our budget and how do we align the programs that we plan to provide for our constituents of the state of Maryland at an affordable rate? And so those are tough decisions that the legislature is going to make come January. And also, we're going to have to make sure that we address those issues head on. But one of the things I would propose is that when it comes to the issues of uh, cost, you know, I'm looking at it from a perspective: is there competition or is there monopoly? And how do we make sure that we're setting caps when it comes to doing business or renting? I had a conversation with a business owner, and she was saying when it comes to doing business, they're getting taxed at such a high rate. So the question is, how do we attract businesses into the city so we can bring down the cost of property? And so it's not a one-step approach; it's a multi-layer approach. But we have to sit down and analyze what our priorities are and how do we address that, address affordability.
Thank you again for your time, and I wish you well on the campaign trail.
Oh, thank you. You too.